Sometimes it's really nice to be able to create your own DIY decor because you made it and it has a lot of personal meaning to you. But if you're not quite sure where to get started for your fall decorating, I have put together some very easy DIY decor projects that you can make for fall 2024 using things that you get at the Dollar Tree. So let's get started.
It all just goes away. The things I plan to say, oh baby.
Now I found this cute little pumpkin at my local Dollar Tree, and while it's really cute, I wanted to see if I could make this look a little bit better. The flowers are not horrible, so I will definitely save those for another project, but I'm going to go ahead and take those out of this pumpkin. So I am going to do the same type of floral arrangement in this pumpkin, but I want to make it a little bit bigger. So first I'm going to increase the size of the hole that's in the pumpkin, and I just used an X-Acto knife. I think this is a Fisker's X-Acto knife, but I made the hole a little bit larger. And while I really do like this pumpkin, I like the glitter and everything on it, I want to change it to a more neutral green. So this is Mossy Meadow by Folk Art. So I'm taking some of that acrylic paint and I'm going to apply 1 coat of paint all over the pumpkin. I'm trying to go a little more neutral this year, so I want to do a lot of sagey type greens and more of a cream color. I really like that look. I think it looks really nice, and I wanted to incorporate more of that into my decorating this year. So once I finished painting the pumpkin with that sage green, then I came back with some white, and this is just white acrylic paint, and I just put that over top of the sage green. And there was no rhyme or reason to what I was doing. I just put some white paint on. Then I came back with a dry chip brush and just blended that green and the white together. This gives the pumpkin a little bit of definition, and I really like how the white and the green flow together. And after the pumpkin had completely dried, then I came back with a coat of matte finish Mod Podge. And I really like the look that this will give to the end project. And I'm really lucky, my Dollar Tree is getting a lot of their fall products in right now. So all of these flowers came from the Dollar Tree. So I have these little sunflowers. So these are a smaller sunflower. And I separated out each of the stems and then placed them into the larger opening of the pumpkin. Then I came back with, I don't know what these are called. I think they're willow. I don't know, but they're really pretty and definitely give a fall vibe to my floral arrangement. Next, I took a few fern fronds that were on another group of flowers and I cut them down so that they're smaller, so about 1/4 of the fern frond. And then I just hot glued those to the pumpkin. This is a really simple project that you can get done probably in about a half an hour, and that includes the drying time for the paint as well as the Mod Podge. And once I had used all of the sunflowers from the smaller bunch of sunflowers, then I did come back with 2 larger sunflowers, and yes, these are from the Dollar Tree as well, and I just added those to my arrangement. And that is pretty much it. Like I said, this is a really simple project that you can do in probably about a half an hour. And why I like this is you can take an idea and then you can personalize it to fit into your decorating theme. Now for this next project, I'm going to be making a pumpkin. So I've got 2 of these wooden crates from the Dollar Tree and I'm going to glue them together. But first I've got to remove the tag on the back. And thankfully the tags are coming off these wood products really easily right now. So I took some Dollar Tree wood glue and I put that around all 4 sides of one of the crates. And then I carefully brought the two crates together. And then I applied a little bit of pressure to really help them to join together. After they were completely dry, I came back with some orange paint, and I believe this was from Decor. I think this was orange spice, but I am not 100% sure. But I painted the crates with the orange paint. And I made sure to paint both the front and the back, both sides, and the top of the two crates. I did that with the orange first, and then I came back with my favorite brown, which is burnt umber, and I just drew some lines onto the crates. Now, to me, I can really see this looking like a pumpkin. And I like the different shades of the brown and the orange that I get by blending these two paints together. If you don't like doing something like that, you can use different colors, or you don't have to blend two colors, but this is what it looks like when it's all done. So I did decide to make a pumpkin stem out of some jute twine, and I love how this pumpkin stem turned out. I think I'm going to show you in an upcoming video, but I just secured that to the top of the crates. Now that pumpkin stem will actually cover up both of those holes on the top. And now all I have to do is add a little bit of embellishing. So I started off with some Spanish moss, and yes, this is from the Dollar Tree. I've been really happy with the Spanish moss that I've gotten from Dollar Tree. Next, I had some burlap type ribbon, and what I did was just cut some leaf shapes into the ribbon, and then I secured that to the top of my pumpkin as well. I really like how that's looking so far. Next, I took some more of the burlap ribbon that I had, and I believe I got this at Hobby Lobby, and I just cut off one side because I really like how it's kind of frayed on one edge. And then I cut some pieces of that, and I also secured that to the top of my pumpkin. Then I took some paper covered wire. I love this stuff. If you wrap it around a paintbrush, you can make like little tendrils. And the smaller the paintbrush, the tighter the little curly Q is going to be. So I just took some of those little curly Qs and I put those onto my pumpkin as well. And I didn't show you, but I put some orange twine and also a little raffia bow. I put those at the top of the pumpkin too. Then I made some corkscrew curly Qs, whatever you want to call it, out of some pip berries, and attached those to the top of the pumpkin with some hot glue. And then I found this little acorn. I think this was a part of a Dollar Tree garland. So I thought about putting two on top, but I decided on just one. Next, I took some faux greenery pieces. And this is why I don't throw anything away, because I can always use these little pieces for projects. So I put some of the little greenery on top, and then I also added in another sunflower. And there's my pumpkin. I love how this pumpkin turned out, and I really, really like my pumpkin stem. I think I'm going to have to try to paint one on my next pumpkin and see how it looks. But overall, I really like this pumpkin. I know it's been done before, but that's what's so fun with projects like this, because you can personalize it to whatever you want it to be. And I don't know if you saw my little pumpkin spice sign in the background, but I figured I better show you how to do this. This is really easy. I got this gold frame at Dollar Tree, and what I'm going to do is just put some Mod Podge onto the backing of it. And I'm going to use this scrapbooking paper that's very fall-like, and I'm going to secure it to the back of the picture frame, which will be the side of the picture frame that you'll be seeing. And once the Mod Podge had dried, then I came back and just used a scissors to cut that scrapbooking paper down to just the frame itself. And the Dollar Tree has so many wonderful fall window clings. So what I did next was I took Mod Podge and I painted that on top of my scrapbook paper. Then I chose which of the window clings I wanted to use, and I just put it on top of the scrapbook paper. Now, I wanted to make sure that this was lined up and that there were no air bubbles. So I used my Cricut roller, my brayer tool, I think this is what it's called, just to make sure there was no air pockets on the sign. And I did not do a coat of Mod Podge on the top of this window cling. I left it just like this. Then I tied a little shoestring bow out of some jute twine. And I wasn't quite sure if I wanted to put it at the top or the bottom of the picture, and I decided on the top, and I secured it in place with a little bit of hot glue. And then all I had to do was put the picture back into the frame. And my project is complete. And again, like all of the projects that I'm sharing with you today, this is very easy to do. And can you see all of the possibilities of things that you can create using Dollar Tree window clings? Oh my goodness, I love this. Okay, so this is a Dollar Tree wreath hanger. They have these all of the time, but they're pretty plain. So I took a Dollar Tree metal pumpkin and I'm going to put that onto the wreath hanger. But first I have to get that post off of the pumpkin. And thankfully it did break off pretty easily. Sometimes they are very hard to get off. Thankfully this one was fairly easy to remove. So I just moved it back and forth until the bottom portion came off. And look at that, I have a very pretty white pumpkin that I'm going to secure to my wreath hanger. Now I want this to be a permanent bond. So I took some tumbling tower blocks and I took some E6000 and I put E6000 onto the tumbling tower blocks. And I also did a little bit of hot glue for that instant stick. And I put the tumbling tower blocks onto the center of the pumpkin. Then I repeated the process with the tumbling tower blocks, but this is the side that's going to be secured to the wreath hanger. So I did 2 little drops of the E6000 on each tumbling tower block. Then I came back with a drop of the hot glue. And then I just carefully made sure that it was going to measure up onto the wreath hanger. And I have seen wreath hangers like this at Hobby Lobby and places like that, but I just love how this looks. And I think this will be so pretty hanging on my front door with one of my fall wreaths that I'm going to be making this year. So for a little over $2.50, you can make a really fancy wreath hanger for your front door for your fall decorating. I love all of the boxes that the Dollar Tree has. You can do so many things with these. So with this one, I'm going to make this a wooden planter. I really like the size of this one. I think it's going to be perfect. So I'm just going to take some craft sticks and I'm going to put them on all 4 sides going around the box. So I started by cutting off one end of the craft sticks. And I wasn't sure how many craft sticks I was going to use for this project, so I just cut a whole bunch of them. And then I measured how long the sticks needed to be for each side of the rectangle box. And then I cut the rest of the craft stick down to size. So I'm left with the remaining little stick that's going to go onto the box. And then I just secured each of those pieces onto the box. And for whatever reason, I did have to cut one of the craft sticks down a little bit so that it would fit. Next, I took another craft stick and I measured off how much I would have to cut off one end because I want to put a craft stick going the opposite direction on the top and the bottom of this box. And this is so cute. Can you see how that almost looks like a window box? So once I was done, this is what my little box planter looked like. Now there were a little bit of gaps, especially on the corners of the box where the craft sticks didn't quite meet up. So I did use my hot glue gun and fill in those cracks with a little bit of hot glue, and then I smoothed it down using one of those finger protectors from the Dollar Tree. Now, if you were going to be staining this, which you could do, I would probably use like wood filler, maybe not hot glue because that's not going to stain very well. But for my box, I'm just going to be using some acrylic paint, so the hot glue actually worked really well. It's almost like the hot glue is caulking for the box. And I did want to raise up this box a bit, so I did glue some wooden beads onto the bottom. Then I had this Waverly chalk paint, and the color is truffle. And I just painted everything that was wood with this truffle chalk paint. It would probably be really pretty white too, but I want this to have more of a rich color for my fall decorating, which was why I decided to use the truffle paint. And I did go ahead and paint the top edge, which I had filled in with the hot glue. And I painted down a little bit into the box as well. And once it was dry, this is how it turned out. And I always have Dollar Tree floral foam, so I took a chunk of that and I put some glue onto it, and then I secured it into the box. This is where I will be attaching my flowers to my arrangement. I love making floral arrangements for fall. It is so much fun. And the fall colors to me really help these faux florals not look so faux. And I did get all of these flowers at the Dollar Tree. And I did get some more of those willow branches. They work really well for fall floral arrangements. And here is the end product. And I did add a couple of Dollar Tree pumpkins. I really like this. I think it turned out great, and I'm so excited to use this for my decorating. I love how the planter turned out, and who would even think that that is a Dollar Tree box? Now this project, I had this terracotta planter from the Dollar Tree that I got, I think, a year ago. And I also had these half wooden beads. So what I did was just secure the half wooden beads around the top edge of the flower pot. My spacing actually worked out pretty well this time. But I wanted this to have more of a stone appearance, so I took some gray chalk paint that I've had forever, and I just really needed to use it. So I took the gray paint and I painted the entire flower pot and all of the wooden beads with the gray chalk paint. And next I came back with some white acrylic paint while the gray was still wet, and I just painted on that white paint. There is no rhyme or reason to how I was doing this, but I do like doing this type of painting when you add multiple colors and they're wet. So the colors are going to blend together. I just really like that look. And to me, it gives it a more authentic look, a more, I don't know, vintage look. I don't know, but I don't like just one solid color. I like the colors blending together. And once I had enough of that white acrylic paint covering the gray, then with the chip brush, I came back and just kind of pounced the paint on. And while the flower pot was drying, I decided to work on the pumpkin part of this project. And I have this apple barrel paint. This is antique parchment. So I just put some of that into a cup, and then I added some salt wash. If you haven't used salt wash before, this is so much fun to add a lot of texture to any project that you're working on. So I wanted to see if by adding some of this salt wash, I could get rid of that line a little bit around the center of the pumpkin. Yes, it's always going to look like a foam pumpkin, but I thought this might help it look a little more higher end and not so Dollar Tree. And another thing that I did was add a coat of Mod Podge to the pumpkin once all of the paint had dried. The matte finish Mod Podge gives it more of a satin look. And again, I think that gives it more of a high-end look and not so much of a Dollar Tree foam pumpkin. So now my flower pot is dry and I love how that looks. So I'm going to take some of my Dollar Tree foam and put it into the center of the pot. And yes, I did have some more Dollar Tree Spanish moss that I pushed down into the pot. And when my pumpkin was all dry, then I came back with my little Fiskars cutting tool and I took the stem off. And I took another stem that I had made with some jute twine and I used that for my pumpkin. Isn't that cute? Then all I had to do was secure the pumpkin to the flower pot, so I used some hot glue on the bottom of the pumpkin and put the pumpkin onto the floral foam in the pot. I did decide I wanted to add a little bit of something extra, so I took a few more of the green leaves that I always like to save and I hot glued them underneath the pumpkin. And this is how my project turned out. I really do like it. I really do think the salt wash looks great on these foam pumpkins. It doesn't look so styrofoam. And adding in a stem like this one really helps it to look a little higher end than Dollar Tree. You can still see that middle seam, but I think it does look a lot better than it did. And I'm totally into pumpkins right now. So I took some different pumpkins that I had, and I believe all three of these came from the Dollar Tree, and I had painted them before, but I want to create a new type of topiary. So I'm going to paint all of the pumpkins again. That's one thing that I really enjoy, finding these pumpkins at Dollar Tree, because they're very affordable and you can reuse them over and over again depending on what kind of look you're going for in your fall decorating. So I did use the antique parchment for the largest pumpkin. Then I came back with some deco art. I believe this is orange spice and some white paint. And I just painted it randomly onto the middle size pumpkin, which will be in the middle of my topiary. And for the tiny pumpkin, I used some raw sienna as well as some white paint. And again, I did not blend them together because I really like how that looks on the pumpkin as I'm painting it on. It gives different textures, different colors, and I think it adds a lot of dimension to these little fake pumpkins. And I needed a pot for my topiary to sit in. So this is just like a muffin tin, I believe. It's in the kitchen section at the Dollar Tree, and you get 2 of them for $1.25. But I didn't want it to be white, so I took some burnt umber matte paint. I believe this is apple barrel, and I painted it and allowed it to dry. Then I came back with a little bit of Dollar Tree floral foam and secured that to the center. And then I used Spanish moss around the edges and pushed it down into the muffin cup, added a little bit of hot glue, and then started stacking my pumpkins. I did the largest pumpkin on the bottom, and then I put a little more Spanish moss on top of that pumpkin. I came back with my middle pumpkin, which is the orange one. secured that one to the Spanish moss that's on top of the white pumpkin. Added some more hot glue to the top of the second pumpkin. And some more Spanish moss. And I just realized I forgot to paint the pumpkin stem. Now I did leave the original pumpkin stem on this tiny little pumpkin because I didn't think it would make that much of a difference. Then after I put some hot glue onto the middle pumpkin, I attached the third pumpkin. And here is my tiny topiary. I really like how this turned out. I love topiaries at fall. I don't know why. I think they look so cute and they are a wonderful addition to any type of decorating that you're doing for fall. Now I'm sure you've seen these pumpkins at the Dollar Tree. They have them pretty regularly and they are fantastic for doing a little bit of DIY on. So first, to get started, I'm going to remove the embellishments. And I always save these leaves because I like to use them in other projects. And while I really like the pumpkin stem, I'm going to cut it off for now. So now I just have the pumpkin and no stem, and then I'm going to be using this tile from the Dollar Tree. So the first thing I'm going to do is attach the tile to the pumpkin. I just have to move it around a bit to make sure I get the tile completely onto the pumpkin. Then I'm going to smooth everything down. And using a marker, I'm going to outline the shape of the pumpkin onto the tile. And the reason I'm doing this is because once I cut that tile down to size, the backing will actually come off. Yes, it's not attached to the tile itself, which is why I drew an outline on the tile so I can trace it with my scissors and cut it out. And once I have the pumpkin cut out and removed from the backing, then I'm going to go ahead and remove the backing. It's okay if it pulls off some of the picture part of the pumpkin. And then I'm going to attach the tile to the pumpkin. And I use some Dollar Tree wood glue. I love this glue. It's fantastic. And it works really well for projects like this. So I put a lot of the glue all over the pumpkin. Then I took the tile and made sure I had it lined up, or at least I thought I did, but it was upside down. So it's easily removed, and then I can go ahead and secure it onto the MDF cutout of the pumpkin. And a word of caution, you need to use some sort of glue like a wood glue or Elmer's glue. Do not use a hot glue gun because it will melt the tile. And once the tile had dried, then I came back with some burnt umber acrylic paint. I love burnt umber. This is probably my favorite brown acrylic paint. It doesn't matter if it's a chalk paint or an acrylic paint. Burnt umber is my favorite brown paint to use in all of my projects. So I just coated the entire tile with the burnt umber paint and then I set it off to dry. Once it was dry, I came back with this folk art crackle medium. Now this is going to make the next layer of paint look older. This is such a fun medium to use, especially if you want something to have a more vintage or older appearance. The crackle medium from folk art will really help you to get that old vintage look. And I decided to come back with this Deco Art burlap paint. And I love how you can see the difference in the tile. You can see the tile actually standing out. And I just put that second layer of paint all over the first layer. But I couldn't really see the crackling, so I came back with some folk art sheepskin paint, which is definitely lighter than both the burlap and the burnt umber paint. And I painted the entire pumpkin with the sheepskin paint. And once it had dried, this is the crackle coat. Isn't that pretty? Next, I came back with some Crafters Collection terracotta paint from Hobby Lobby, and I used a chip paintbrush and I lightly brushed that across the entire pumpkin. So I'm doing this because I want to see that tile pattern really pop out, and using contrasting colors will make those popped out sections stand out more. And because my pumpkin is a pumpkin, I wanted it to be orange. So I just had light coats of that terracotta paint on my paintbrush and just painted it all over the pumpkin. Now I'm going back to the pumpkin stem, and what's fun about removing it is you can decide which direction you want it to go. But I don't want this to have a flat appearance, so I'm going to be using this joint compound, and I'm going to apply a pretty heavy coat to what's going to be the outward or the portion of my pumpkin stem that is going to be visible. And once I had a nice heavy coat of it on the pumpkin stem, then I came back with a more stiff paintbrush, and this is a Dollar Tree paintbrush, and I just painted over the stem. This will give some different texture and lines to the pumpkin stem. Then I set it off to dry and got to work on my pumpkin because I need to make a bow. And I had this scarf that I got at a thrift store, and I really like that fringe edge, so I'm going to keep that for another project. But then I just cut off one long side of the scarf, probably about an inch wide, and I just made loops with this material. I did this because I didn't have any ribbon that was this color, and I was looking for more of a brown color because I want to try to keep this like browns and oranges and creams, more neutral colors for fall. So I just made little loops and then I attached them to the pumpkin. Next, I came back with some wired ribbon and I just twisted the ribbon to make it into a loop. So my bow is going to be very messy and have lots of different colors, but the wire ribbon is fun because you can just twist it and then you have a loop. And then I could just secure it to my bow with a little bit of hot glue. I did also add a couple of tails to this part of the ribbon, and I dovetailed or swallows-tailed the ends. However you like to say that. I basically cut off a triangle and on the ends of the ribbon to make it have those two little triangles at the very end. And I secured them in place with some hot glue as well. I also had this material from Dollar Tree, and I did the same thing, cutting strips about an inch wide. Then to make it have a little bit of a tattered edge, I just used a Cricut tool to peel away some of the fibers, and that will give it more of a frayed appearance. Then I made loops with those and attached those in between the other loops that are already on the pumpkin. So my bow is really starting to look like a bow, but I want to add some extra embellishments. So I'm taking some raffia, just single pieces of raffia, and I'm just laying them on top of all of those loops of my bow. It seems like it's the little details that you add to these projects that really make them stand out and make them unique. And once I was happy with this amount of raffia, then I did come back with my hot glue gun and just put a little bit of hot glue on top of the raffia pieces. That way I don't have to secure each individual one with the glue gun. Then I came back with these berries. I think they're called pip berries. It's either pip or pit. I'm not sure. Is it pip, P-I-P, or is it pit, P-I-T? Leave me a comment and let me know, are these pip or pit berries? I just cut little sections of the berries and secured them in place with some hot glue. And then I came back with some raffia that I had looped together and put that down towards the bottom, more towards the tails of my ribbon. And next I took some Dollar Tree ribbon and I cut off 6 pieces. They weren't exactly all the same. And I added a little bit of hot glue to the ends, and then I folded them over to make more loops. If you're not gifted at making bows this way to me is a lot of fun, and you can add a lot of different elements to your bows. You can also do the bows where you're just adding the strips of material, which I'll probably do in an upcoming project, but I wanted this pumpkin to have more of a poofy bow, and I didn't want it to be perfect, so this is why I'm making all of these separate loops. I also added in a few tails of that Dollar Tree ribbon. Then I came back with this orange, I guess, holiday style ribbon, and I did make a loopy bow using 6 loops, and then I just used some wire to tie it off so I can use the wire to secure the center of the bow. Then I came back with one more strip of that same ribbon and just wrapped it around the center to cover up the wire. Now the longer section of that ribbon that I'm using to cover the center of the bow or the wire, I'm going to keep that long because that's going to be one of the tails for my bow. Then I added a little bit more hot glue and I took another piece of ribbon and secured it to be the other tail for the bow. And then I secured that in the center of my messy bow. Isn't that pretty? But I did want to add one extra thing, so I have a bunch of buttons. So I just took a rustic looking button and secured that to the final bow. And I really love how this looks. The different layers of the bow and the different layers of all of the elements really make this look special. Next, I took a little piece of burlap ribbon and I secured that on the opposite side of the pumpkin. So it's on the opposite lower corner of the pumpkin, opposite of the bow. Then I took my stamps. Now I really love these letter stamps. They're so nice because you can actually spell out words and you secure the letters together. So I will be stamping the entire word at one time. I don't have to worry about measuring the letters and making sure I have them exact. Just by putting these together, I can write out any word that I want to. So I just wrote out Hello Pumpkin on some scrap material. And then I used some pinking shears to size down each of the words. And then using some hot glue, I secured the fabric to the burlap. And to tie everything together and make it look cohesive, I used another button and I just glued that right to the side of the Hello Pumpkin. But again, I want to add some extra embellishments. So I put a little bit of jute on one end, and then I took some of those pip berries and put them over the tied up jute. Next, I came back with this ink and this ink dauber, and this is supposed to be brown, but it really looks orange next to the terracotta on the pumpkin. So I just went over the entire pumpkin, really paying attention to the edges and used a little bit of ink. By this time, my pumpkin stem had completely dried, so I took different colors using burnt umber, raw sienna, I think raw umber was another one, and I just painted my pumpkin stem. I did this in different layers, and in the very last layer, I added some gold. Now, this is a really stiff paintbrush from Dollar Tree, and it works really great to just give more of a dry brush appearance to projects like this. Then I came back, and if there was any areas that were still showing that joint compound, I used a little bit of burnt umber acrylic paint. And once I gave that a few minutes to dry, then I came back with a little bit of hot glue and put that on the bottom of my stem and then secured it to my pumpkin. Once it was tacky, then I flipped it over and did a little bit more hot glue at the base to make sure that the pumpkin stem is going to stay in place. All that's left to do now is to attach a hanger. So I used a piece of jute twine and some fabric scraps, and using some hot glue, I just secured the jute twine to the back of the pumpkin, and then I put the material scraps over the jute twine to help keep it in place. And here is my pumpkin. Oh my goodness, look at how adorable this pumpkin is. It's definitely the fall season, so I am so excited to bring you more projects like this, well as the tall book stack, and they're specifically made for fall. And these book stacks are really easy to embellish and make look a little bit fancier. So first I put a little bit of ribbon around the tall book stack. So I just want to really make this area pop. So I'm going to add some of my own ribbon. And I did secure that on all sides of the book stack. And I repeated this process on the long book stack too. So the book stack that looks like they're laying on their sides, they took a little bit of ribbon and just embellished it in the same place that the original ribbon was. And once I had that finished, I did go ahead and add a little bit of jute twine around, going over top of the ribbon area of the books, because I want to, again, make this look more high-end. And then I took another piece of jute that I had put some beads on, and I just hot glued that to the book stack as well. And then I added a tiny jute bow. So then I wanted to embellish the tall one. I decided to add a little bit more fall ribbon, and this ribbon has pumpkins on it, and I thought that would look really nice. And for this stack of books, I'm going to be using some baker's twine that again is in fall color, so it's orange and white. And I'm just going to secure it in between the ribbons that I already have on this stack of books. I just tied it in the back and used a little bit of hot glue. Then I added a bow. And then I added some extra embellishments with a fall leaf and a half of a pumpkin. And here are my book stacks. I am really happy with how these turned out, and I didn't have to do a lot to embellish these or to make them look more high-end, and yes, they are from Dollar Tree. Pretty was this little sign. So in the middle of the sign it says bless, and then there are these beads and this bow on top, and it's just so pretty. And all I did was take my hot glue gun, put a little bit of hot glue down the center of the back of it, and then I attached it to a riser. So I made this with Dollar Tree items as well, and I just put that blessed onto it. So now I have like a centerpiece that I can use for my fall decorating. And this riser was really easy to make. I just used a Dollar Tree, a smaller burner cover, a candlestick, and a cake pan. And then I used spray paint to make everything white. And now I have this really pretty display that I can use in my fall decorating. Every single fall, I find all kinds of different types of window clings. And I wanted to show you how easy it is to incorporate this into your fall decor. Now, if you have scrap wood, you can make your own little sayings for tiered trays or just anything to add to your decor. So what I did was take some acrylic paints and paint these scrap pieces of wood in different colors for fall. And these are actually scraps of wood that I got from a surprise box on Amazon. I will leave a link in the description box. And once I had the scrap wood squares or rectangles painted, then I took some Mod Podge and I put it all over the painted surface of the wood. Then I took a window cling and put that on top of it. And once I had smoothed it down, I put a little bit more Mod Podge on top of the window cling and just smoothed it down again, because I really want to make sure that this window cling is going to stay in place. And this little sign is just about done. This one says gather. I repeated the process with other window clings as well. So first on this orange painted scrap of wood, I attached another window cling and then just smoothed it down. If it's a larger window cling, you'll want to make sure that you really smooth it down because you don't want air bubbles to be on the bottom of the window cling. Then I took some more Mod Podge and put that on the top to really secure it in place. And then I took another window cling, and I wasn't sure. I kind of liked this one with the flowers, but in the end I decided on the pumpkin. So again, I took more Mod Podge and then put the window cling in place. And you guessed it, I used a layer of Mod Podge to cover the cling. And with each of these window clings having so many individual clings, there are a lot of little embellished pieces of wood that you can make for your decorating. And by adding extra embellishments to these little blocks of wood, it really makes it look high-end and stand out from something that, say, you would get at the Dollar Tree. They are great additions to your tiered tray decorating or even just incorporating into a little group of items that you have for your decor. First, you just open up the straw bales, and then you add some embellishments. For mine, I have this Dollar Tree material. It's kind of a fall plaid, and I just wrap that around the center of the bale of straw. It's easy to put the embellishments in place, like the ribbons, with a little bit of hot glue. And I just used the hot glue all the way around the bale and secured all of the material in place. And once that was secured, then I came back with a couple of different types of twine. So I have some baker's twine that's in white and orange, and I also have this jute twine that is orange, which is perfect for my fall decorating. I just tied that into a knot on the back of the bale of straw. And then I did make a bow to go on the front of the bale. I just put a little bit of hot glue and then secured the bow in place, and now I have a very pretty straw bale for my fall decorating. And you don't have to do the material. If you have some ribbon, you can use ribbon as well. So for this little straw bale, I just have this, I don't know what this is. It's very popular in the fall. Is it black watch plaid? I don't even know. But this is like a farmhouse plaid. So all I did was put some ribbon around the straw bale, glue it in place, and then I added a bow that I made. And they are so cute, and they make a really nice addition to your tiered tray or any area that you're decorating for fall. Different Dollar Tree, and I found these houses. They are so cute. They're a lot larger than the wooden houses that I'm used to finding at Dollar Tree. And this one actually had an embellishment on the front, so I went ahead and removed that. And I also removed the top edges, which is the roof line of the house. Then I used some craft sticks and cut them down to the size that would be the roof line, and I glued 2 craft sticks together. Now, while my roof line was drying, then I came back to the house and I put Mod Podge all over top of it. Now, this house had material on it, so I did have to do a pretty thick coat of Mod Podge. Then, using some craft paper that's themed for Thanksgiving and fall, I pressed that onto the front of the house with the Mod Podge. Then I used my scraping tools to really make sure that it was secured in place on the house. Now, once I had a little bit of time to dry, I did come back with some scissors and cut that paper down so that it's going to fit onto that house a little bit better. And then, using a Dollar Tree sanding block, I sanded down all of the edges. These sanding blocks are so nice to have for your craft room, because if you're doing a project like this, it gives a kind of rustic look to the piece. So I just did the sanding block all the way around the edges of the house, and that will help to remove the edges of the paper that overhang. Next, I came back to my craft stick roof, and I used some antiquing wax, and I put that all over the front and the top and the bottom and the sides of the craft sticks. I wasn't too worried about the back because I'm going to glue those in place. Then I removed the excess wax with a towel. Now, while my roof line was drying, I did come back with some burnt umber paint, and I went around the outside of the house. So not the back, it's just the sides, the top, everywhere a side is showing, because I wanted it to be a darker color. I didn't want it to be the natural color. But I wanted to blend that side into the front of the house a little bit, so I came back with a chip brush. I think this is a 1.5 inch chip brush, and I lightly brushed some of that burnt umber paint all the way around, like the outline of the house. Next, I came back with a Dollar Tree foam pumpkin, one of the small ones, and I cut it in half, which I'm going to be using in a minute. But next I attached the roof to the house. Then I came back with some jute twine and securing it to the back of the house. I wrapped it around so that the different strands will show. So it's not all gathered up in one line. It's actually spread out across the house. And once that part was done, then I came back with the half pumpkin and I glued that to the front of the house. And just for one little extra piece, I went ahead and put a little shoestring bow on top of the pumpkin. And here's an easy project. Look at that, so easy, and it looks great. I think this is a great addition to my fall decorating this year. Frames. And I thought it would be fun to turn a picture frame from the Dollar Tree into a piece of fall art. And I really liked the frame of this 5x7-inch picture frame from Dollar Tree. So after I removed everything from the frame, including the glass, the back, everything, then I came back with some folk art sheepskin chalk paint and I painted the entire frame. I really made sure to get the front, the back, sides, anything that could potentially show, I want to coat with this chalk paint. And once that first coat had dried, what I did was come back with some more of that sheepskin chalk paint, but I did add in some salt wash. Now salt wash is fun because it does give some texture. For the second layer of paint, I just kind of pounced it on over top of the first layer. This makes it so you can see lots of different texture in the frame. And I just worked my way around the frame. Then I found a really nice pumpkin on, I don't even know where I found this, somewhere online in somebody's printable library. And I copied it onto a heavier cardstock paper and then I cut it out. And I didn't want the edges to look like they were freshly cut out, so I did take some sandpaper and run that all the way around the edges of the pumpkin. Then I had this black, I think it's called black tuxedo cardstock. I cut it to fit the frame size. Then I put a little bit of Mod Podge on it and then put the pumpkin to the cardstock. Then I just used a little bit more Mod Podge and really worked it down so that this is going to adhere more like a glue than anything else. And yes, I did get a little heavy-handed with the Mod Podge, but that was intentional because then I came back with a Dollar Tree stiff brush paintbrush and then I just kind of pounced into the Mod Podge because I want to give this some texture and look more like a painting than just two pieces of paper that I put together. I also did a coat of Mod Podge on the frame itself. And once that was dry, all I had to do was take the cute little pumpkin picture and put it into the frame, put the back on, and now I have a piece of art. But I decided I wanted to add a little bit more. So I came back with some fall ribbon and I just cut strips of this ribbon and then also cut, I don't know, it's a swallow's tail or a dove's tail, but I did that on all edges of this ribbon. So I had two little plaid pieces of ribbon. Then I had some larger brown and white gingham ribbon that I did the same thing to. And then I added some other ribbon. So I have a whole bunch of ribbon that I'm going to gather up using some floral wire, and I'm going to turn this into a more rustic or messy bow. Messy bows are so much fun to make and they're easy. Then I secured that to the corner of my picture frame, but I did want to add a little bit more orange, so I added some more ribbon, and there's my pumpkin picture. This project was very easy to do, and I think it looks really high-end. It definitely doesn't look like something that came from Dollar Tree. That texture around the picture frame, I think that really adds a level of something special to the project, that process. So I decided to take another one of those pumpkins, and some scrapbooking paper that looks like wood and see if I could make a wood pumpkin riser. So first I measured off the pumpkin onto the paper and then cut the paper down to size so that it would cover up the entire pumpkin. Then I used some Mod Podge and put a pretty substantial coat of it onto the pumpkin. Next I took the paper and I just pressed that down onto the pumpkin, and I also flipped it over and repeated that just to really make sure this is stuck on. Then I removed a lot of that excess and used a Cricut scraping tool to really make sure that this paper is secured down to the pumpkin. I did use my fingers a little bit to kind of go along the outline of the pumpkin. And then I came back with a scraping tool because that puts a really nice indentation into the paper so you can really see the edge of the pumpkin. Next, I came back with some sandpaper and just removed all of the excess paper from the pumpkin. Now this is going to be a riser. So I've got these little wood turnings. I think they're like wood cabinet handles or drawer pulls. And I used some Dollar Tree wood glue, and I secured 4 of those onto the bottom of the pumpkin. Then I came back to the top of the pumpkin and I added in some more Mod Podge. Now again, yes, I get heavy-handed with the Mod Podge. I don't know why, I just like Mod Podge, I guess. Then I wanted to add some cookies, so I made some cookies using Sculpey clay, and then I used some orange hot glue. It's kind of a glossy color to be the frosting for the pumpkins. Now this was so much fun, but each pumpkin really used a lot of the orange hot glue sticks. And I think I'm going to try to make cookies using like air dry clay, because the Sculpey clay, that is really expensive just to make 7 cookies, because it took 2 packages of the Sculpey clay to make 7 cookies. Oh! I also did use some orange glitter hot glue, but I really like the way that just the solid orange looks on these cookies. It really looks like frosting. And here are my pumpkins on my wooden pumpkin riser. These are so cute. They turned out really nice, and I really love how the wood riser turned out. You could use this for your tiered tray. You could use it in any part of your fall decorating. Now for this dupe, I'm going to be using 3 pumpkins. So you probably guessed we're going to be making a topiary. The smaller pumpkins I got at Dollar Tree, and the larger one is from Hobby Lobby. And this is what I'm going to try to be making. This is a topiary from Grandin Road, and as you can see, it's $231 on sale. That's way too rich for my blood. So I thought I would see if I could dupe this Grandin Road pumpkin topiary with a couple of pumpkins from the Dollar Tree and Hobby Lobby. So the first thing I did was remove all 3 of the stems. Here's a fun trick. Put a tall paintbrush into your pumpkin. That way you can pick it up for painting. And this pumpkin, I did paint it with some Deco Art Spiced Pumpkin, but I didn't like it. It was a little too light. So I decided to use another Deco Art paint, and this is Burnt Orange. This is definitely a little bit darker, and it will look more like that Grandin Road bottom pumpkin of the topiary. So I did go ahead and repaint the entire pumpkin with the Burnt Orange. And once I had finished the large pumpkin that goes on the bottom, then I came back with some folk art chalk paint, and this is in sheepskin. And I went ahead and painted the smallest pumpkin, and this is the pumpkin that's going to be on the top of the topiary. I really like the folk art chalk paint because you don't have to use a whole lot of it. It will go a long way. And I also painted the middle pumpkin with the sheepskin paint as well. And the middle pumpkin only took 1 coat of the sheepskin paint because it was already a light color. Now, once all my pumpkins had dried, this is what they look like. And I went ahead and removed the paintbrush because I'm not sure if I'm going to be needing those anymore. This is what my topiary will be like. So it's actually pretty tall with these 3 pumpkins. And I decided to start with the middle pumpkin because this is where I'm going to be adding some texture. So I got this texture paste and I wasn't exactly sure how I could duplicate that middle pumpkin on the Grandin Road topiary. So I tried some different tools. And this is what I decided to use because this was giving me the look that I wanted on this pumpkin. And using the palette knife, I moved the texture paste around a bit onto the pumpkin. And when I was doing it, I just lifted up the palette knife a little bit, and that really gave a lot of texture to this pumpkin. I continued that process around the pumpkin in different random areas, so no matter which way the pumpkin turns, you will be able to see a little bit of that texture. And this is the first time that I've ever used a texture medium or texture paste, and I have to say this was really fun to work with. I know they do come in different colors, but I went with an opaque color because I was thinking that I was going to add a little bit of color to this, but in the end, I really liked the texture just how it was, and I think it stands out nicely on its own. Now for the little pumpkin or the top pumpkin of the topiary, and I had this acrylic paint from Anita's, and I'm not sure if Hobby Lobby is not selling it anymore, but that's where I found this paint at. But I think you could use any orange that you wanted to, depending on the look that you are going for with your pumpkin if you're going to do this project. And I started this by filling in the creases of the pumpkin with the acrylic paint. Now, there was a couple of places I wasn't sure if I should, fill in every single crease. So I did it on one side, but on the other side of the pumpkin, I did not. But I really do like how the orange stands out against that sheepskin color. Then I came back and just put dots on all of the white parts of the pumpkin. And again, I'm trying to duplicate the pumpkin topiary from Grandin Road. And I really like this. I think it looks really nice, and it may not be exact, but it's close. Now I just have the large pumpkin. So I took some burnt umber acrylic paint and then I added some water to it to really water it down. Then on all of the creases, I came in with the burnt umber paint and then just removed the excess. Now, at first when I was doing this, I think I got a little too much burnt umber and I wasn't quite sure if this was going to work. But after a little bit of practice and just removing some of the paint, I could really see the shadows developing in those creases. And that was what I was really hoping to achieve. I did go back over the creases a couple of times until I got the darkness or the shadowed area that I really wanted this pumpkin to have. And that's what I really love about crafting is you can just keep practicing until you get it how you want it to be. I did also come back to the top of the pumpkin and add a little bit of shading there as well. Then I came back with the sheepskin paint, the folk art chalk paint, and I just drew almost like, I don't even know what shape this is. They're not round, but it's kind of like an oval shape. And I did that randomly all around the pumpkin. Once that had dried, I came back with some black acrylic paint and I just drew a little bit of a half of an oval over top of the oval that I had painted with the sheepskin paint. I want to still see that sheepskin color, so I basically did the same shape, only smaller with the black paint. I think that looks really unique. I like it. And then every pumpkin got a thick coat of Mod Podge. And once that was dry, I used some E6000 and then I secured the pumpkins to each other. And there is a topiary. And I wanted a larger pumpkin stem for my top pumpkin, and I really like this flat style of a pumpkin stem. So this was donated by another Hobby Lobby pumpkin for another project that I'm going to be sharing with you. And I just removed the stem and then just cut away all of the adhesive and glue that was holding that stem onto the pumpkin. And then removed the excess plastic from the bottom. And that is what it's going to look like. So I put a little bit of E6000 onto the pumpkin stem, and then I used a little bit of hot glue for that instant stick, and then I put the stem on top of the smallest pumpkin. And while my pumpkins were drying, I wanted to have a container or a vase or vessel for my topiary to sit in. So I had these two pieces from the Dollar Tree, and then I just used some E6000 to glue them together. And then I came back with some salt wash, which is an additive that gives texture to projects, and it's so much fun to use. And I added that to kind of a cream colored or antique parchment colored acrylic paint. And then I just painted the entire piece. So the top, the sides, the bottom, everything got a nice thick coat of the thick salt wash acrylic paint mixture. And I really like the texture that this gives. No, it may not look like Pottery Barn or anything like that, but this will make a raised bowl. I'm going to call this a raised bowl.
Never up, never down, never. Like a theme in a song, clever. Feeling high.
And for less than $20, I was able to make a really unique piece for my fall decorating this year using things that I found at Dollar Tree as well as Hobby Lobby. So this may not be just like the Grandin Road topiary, but that's over $200. And for less than $20, I was able to make the raised bowl and give each of these pumpkins a really unique paint job. So I had one of the really inexpensive, the regular $1.25 foam pumpkins. And then I also had a $3 foam pumpkin. So I took the pour paints and I used them on both of these different pumpkins. Now, I did use some Dollar Tree Dixie cups because that seems to work really well to put the different colors of paints in. Then I used a big plastic container that I could actually dump the paints into that would actually collect the paint while I was doing the paint pour. So this was not a really easy project to do. This was probably one of the more challenging ones that I've done because every time I would turn the pumpkin, the paint would just go down like the seams of the pumpkins, and I really wanted it to go different directions. I also played around with the different colors that I had, and when I ran out of the pour paint colors, I did use the pour paint medium and added that to some regular acrylic paint. And I tried to stick with the fall colors. I did a lot of gold, a lot of oranges, terracottas, different colors like that. And I'm really happy with how both of these pumpkins turned out. I did use the bigger pumpkin stems that I've been collecting because some of the pumpkin stems that I've had for the different foam pumpkins, well, I just collect those when I'm replacing them with a different type of a pumpkin stem. But these pumpkin stems were perfect for this project. For my craft, I just wanted to focus on the caramel apples. Now for her caramel apples, she started painting from the bottom of the apple. Well, for mine, I wanted to paint from the top and have it kind of like drip down onto the apple. So what I did was I took some different paints. I took some different acrylic paints that I had, and then I added some high gloss Mod Podge to the paints. Next, I took that paint and I literally poured it over some Dollar Tree apples. I did do a little bit of painting first, just to get a base coat of the caramel color onto the apples. Then I just opened up that acrylic paint and I literally poured it out, kind of like I did with the pour paint for the pumpkins, but I poured it out onto the apples. I wanted to have the different like wavy lines, making it look like it was caramel dripping down from the top of the apple. And while that was wet, I did the next part. And this stuff is so cool. This is actually bedding that you use for small animals, but it really looks like peanuts or a peanut topper that you would use on something like Carmel Apples. So I took some of that bedding and then I just kind of dropped it down onto the apples and just let it go where it was gonna go. I also did use some Dollar Tree dowels. These are smaller dowels that I cut down to size, so it really does have the appearance of a caramel apple. And I couldn't find a lot of these. So the larger apple is from Dollar Tree and it was $1.25, and then the two smaller apples were also from Dollar Tree, which were $1.25 for both of them. The dowels came from Dollar Tree as well to start this off, so I figured I would just do a little bit of painting and just follow. Basically, I was coloring in the lines of the leaves and the different elements that were on this sign. And then I wanted to get a little bit 3D, so I added some different flowers. I also added in a couple of pumpkins that I did put little stems back onto. And I just kept adding pieces until it got to the point where I was really happy with how this piece looked. The only thing that I had left to do was to put a bow on it. So I put the bow on it and I made sure that you can still see that I Love Fall is right in the center. I thought about going over the lettering, but in the end I decided I have enough on this round already, so I'm not going to do any extra. That is something that would, I think, look really nice, but I don't quite trust my handwriting enough, so I'm just gonna leave this just like it is. I had this gold tree from Dollar Tree and I put some E6000 onto the back of it, and then I also put some hot glue to give it that instant stick. And then I just held it in place for a couple of minutes, and just like that I had it's not really a hanger, I guess it's a base for my sign. And like I say, with all of these projects, I am so happy with how this one turned out. I think it turned out really nice and I'm really happy with it, and I really am looking forward to using it in my fall decorating this year. Well, I have a lot of pumpkins that need to have a job. So I took a couple of the pumpkins and then I had these little wooden circles. So I took those and I glued those to the top of the pumpkins. Now these pumpkins, I had already removed the stem, so this part was easy. And once I had the wooden round glued in place, then using a Lazy Susan and some lightweight spackling and a star tip for the frosting, I double bagged the frosting, which is the spackling, and then I just moved that around the pumpkin. I didn't have to cut anything out of the pumpkin. I could literally put that little round piece right on top and then just start frosting it. I really think adding in the Lazy Susan to make it easier to move the pumpkin around, or whatever it is that you're going to be adding this frosting to, it makes it a lot easier. Then I added some extra embellishments to my whipped cream, including a cinnamon stick and cinnamon. And then I did take some of these little flowers and make them look like sprinkles because I don't have any fall sprinkles. But that is one of the things that I really enjoy about crafting is you just use your brain, get a little bit creative, and you can make really fun things like this. Now I still had a big bag of this frosting, so I took some little wooden spoons, put some frosting onto the spoons, put a little bit of cinnamon on there, and then I added some bows from some orange twine. This is almost like jute twine, but it's orange, which is perfect for fall. And I did get that at Hobby Lobby, so that was not a Dollar Tree thing. The pumpkins were all from the Dollar Tree planter. So I took 2 of these Dollar Tree pumpkins, and then I took a Dollar Tree little wooden tote or little wooden box, and I glued those together. Now, at first I thought I was going to try to make this look rusty, but in the end I decided I was gonna paint this. I was gonna spray paint it because that's gonna be the easiest thing to do. And once all of the glue had set up, I took it out in the garage and I gave it a couple of coats of the Rust-Oleum semi-gloss black spray paint that I already had. I really like the spray paint. It goes on very nice, and it only took 2 coats of paint to make this piece look all cohesive and like it was one. And I really like how this looks. I think it looks really nice. Different videos, I finally bought some Rub and Buff. Now, this stuff is so amazing to work with. I had no idea it was like this. If I would have known this sooner, I would have been using this like a long time ago. And even though this is just a small container of this Rub and Buff, you do not need very much of it. When I was using it, I actually used a little bit too much, so that was kind of wasteful. But what I did was put a little bit of the Rub and Buff onto one of my paint trays. Then, using a chip style paintbrush, I lightly brushed that across the pumpkins. And I really like this look. It's kind of like an antique look, kind of old-timey, I guess. But I really like how this turned out. Then I just took some of the flowers that I've been collecting, which seems like forever, and literally made a fall floral arrangement using a couple of things from the Dollar Tree. Everything that I used for this project I already had, which made it so easy to do. I had all of this paint left over, and that was the pour paint that I used on my foam pumpkins. So what I did was I took all of that paint, because it was in a big plastic container, and then I just added a bunch of baking soda. I kept adding more baking soda and more baking soda to make it really thick, or tried to make it a really thick consistency. Next, I took some foam pumpkins, a whole bunch of foam pumpkins that I had, and using a chip brush, because that's the easiest, I just painted my concoction, my paint, onto my pumpkins. And even though I really wanted these to be that stone color, I decided that I really like this Terra Cotta finish. It's orange, it works for fall, and the pumpkins definitely have texture. And when I look closely at the pumpkins, you can see a little bit of glitter that I used for the pour paint pumpkins. I really like how they turned out. They are so pretty. But one thing I forgot to mention was what I did was I reused different pumpkin stems that I, again, have been collecting. Some of them were the originals, some of them were some that I had made, and I just painted the pumpkin stems with that same paint. Then I attached them to the pumpkins with some hot glue, and if there were any gaps between the pumpkin stem and the pumpkin itself, I put a little bit more hot glue so that it would look like it is all one piece, because I wanted my pumpkins to look like they were fancy and all one piece. The same type of pumpkins that you would probably find at Pottery Barn for a lot more money than what it cost me to make these.
All right, so let's start with some risers. And risers are really helpful to elevate different parts of your tiered tray. So this one is really fun. I just found these wood rounds. They're like shaved wood. And then I just attached these little wood turnings to the bottom. And just like that, I've made a really cute wood riser for a tiered tray. But that's not all. I'm going to make some more, and I'm going to use some tumbling tower blocks. Now, these are from the Dollar Tree, and you get, I think, 75 in a package. Now, before I secure all of these pieces together, I just want to play around for a bit and see what kind of a riser or a base that I can make. And I am really liking this. This is so cute. And this took 14 pieces of the tumbling tower blocks that I am gluing together with the wood glue that I got from the Dollar Tree. This wood glue is incredible. It sets up really fast and you don't need very much of it. If you want a really secure project, I really encourage you to use the wood glue from the Dollar Tree. It is awesome. So once I have all of those pieces together, then I'm just going to go ahead and wipe off some of the glue on the one side, and then I'm going to secure those wood turnings to the bottom again. Now these wood turnings make great feet for projects like this. And now that it's all dried, I'm going to take some of this folk art wax and I'm going to paint it or stain it. So if you don't have the folk art wax, you can use stain too. This stuff gets a little bit messy, but I love it. I love the deep color that it gives to any type of wood project that I'm working on. I think I just really like it. This is my most favorite, and actually I'm almost out, so I'm gonna have to buy some more. So I start out on the bottom first because that's the part that no one's gonna see, but I am gonna go ahead and cover that with the wax. And you don't have to be too neat about it, because once you're done with that, then you're going to wipe off the excess wax. And it gives a really nice stained finish to your project. And once I was finished with the bottom, then I just flipped it over and put the wax onto the top of my riser. And again, once I had it completely covered, then I just wiped away the excess. I really like how this turned out. It looks like a little table. There is my wood riser. I've got one more wood riser that I want to show you. So I took a piece of wood. It was just a scrap piece of wood. And then I had these stickers from the Dollar Tree, and I really like the raised sticker. I mean, this is just so pretty. And I thought, you know what, this would be a really pretty edge on a riser. So I went ahead and just put the stickers all around the wood block. Then again, I'm using those wood turnings and I'm going to secure them on the bottom. These are going to be the feet for my little riser. And of course, I am going to be using the Dollar Tree wood glue. All right, all my wood turnings or my feet are in place, and now I'm going to paint my riser. Now for this one, I'm going to be using some chalk paint. I believe this is like a cream color. I can't remember the name of it offhand, but I'm just gonna paint right over those stickers. This is really gonna look neat when it's done. So I started on the side with the sticker portion, and then I'm just making my way to the bottom of the riser. And I'm going to paint everything, the feet, the bottom, the stickers, everything is going to be painted with this chalk paint. Now I'm going to do something a little bit different in this video. I'm not going to reveal these to you until we get to the very end when I show you how I'm going to use these pieces in my fall tiered trays. So be sure to stick around to the end so you can see all of the reveals of these awesome projects. All right, there is my third riser all done. So now it's time for the next project. And this one is so cute. You know how I love topiaries, so I decided I'm gonna make a tiny topiary, and I'm gonna use these foam pumpkins that I got from the Dollar Tree. Now, I really like the foam pumpkins from the Dollar Tree because you get a lot for just a little bit of money. Now, I did find these fall like foam pumpkins and gourds, and these are from Hobby Lobby, and they were 40% off. But see, look at, you could even use that little pumpkin topiary just like that if you wanted to. But I want to change the color, and I want to make this like a sagey green and white pumpkin topiary. So I'm going to go ahead and paint the pumpkins with the sage green paint. Now what's really cool about painting pumpkins, you can do this on any size. It doesn't have to be these super tiny pumpkins. You can do the larger ones too. So if you are changing up your decor and you want to have, say, sage green pumpkins instead of orange ones, you can see it's pretty easy to paint. It will take a couple of coats of paint, but it will definitely be worth it for your decorating. And what a great way to recycle. Now for my middle pumpkin, I'm going to paint it white, because that's going to set off the difference between the sage green pumpkins, and I think it'll look really cute when it's all done. So now my pumpkins are dry, and I'm just going to attach them together for the topiary. It's pretty fun what you can do with your imagination and a few things from the Dollar Tree. And once I have the pumpkins all secured together, then I'm just going to add some little leaves to add a little bit of embellishment to the topiary. And once I was happy with all my little additions, it was done. All right, now we're on to the next project. And this is gonna be a wooden pumpkin. So I found these wood rounds. I know they have them at the Dollar Tree, but I can never find them. So I actually got these at Hobby Lobby, but they're all just like slices of wood. So I'm just gonna take the slices of wood and I'm gonna stack them up on top of each other. I have 3 on the bottom, and then I'm gonna use some hot glue and secure 2 pieces on top. Now that hot glue will work its way down to the lower pieces as well, so don't worry. But then I flipped it over and I did add a little bit of wood glue to the seams. And then just used a tumbling tower block to kind of push that glue around. Now I want to give this a nice wooden stem, so I'm going to take out my little tiny chop saw and I'm going to cut a stick. Now these chop saws are really cute. You can find them on Amazon. They're very helpful in the craft room and they're very affordable. They have lots of different brands, but I will leave a link to this one in the description box below in case you're curious. So now I'm just working with that stick because I'm trying to determine how long I want my pumpkin stem to be. And once I figured it out, then I went ahead and chopped it down to size using my little chop saw. And when I say little chop saw, I mean little. This thing is tiny. So then I have my stem, and I'm pretty happy with the size of it. I think that will look nice. So I'm going to take a little bit more of the Dollar Tree wood glue, and I'm just going to secure the stem to the back of the pumpkin. Now, the way I'm doing it, I'm kind of tipping the front of the pumpkin at an angle, so that way it will stand up on its own. All right, we're on to the next project. So I had these scrap pieces of wood. I think these are, I don't even know, like 1x2s maybe. And I am a big recycler, so I save all scraps because I can do projects like this. So I just cut 3 different sizes of the scrap wood and then painted it with some orange paint. And I believe this is pumpkin orange, and it's just an acrylic. I believe I got it at Walmart. So I'm just gonna paint all 3 scraps of wood the same with this orange paint. Now I painted the front, the back, and 3 of the sides. The bottom I didn't paint because it's gonna be standing up. And while the paint was still wet, I added in some burnt umber, just like little lines of the burnt umber paint. And then I just blended that burnt umber into the orange. And then I went back with some white acrylic paint and added in a couple of white lines on each of the pumpkins. And then blended that in together. I didn't blend completely though, because I do want to see a little bit of the difference. It gives a little bit of depth to the painting. And I continued using a little bit of extra white paint on the sides of the pumpkins as well. And you can see, even if you get a lot of paint on it, it's okay. You can just add a little bit more orange and you can just make this original, make it unique, make it your own. And once the pumpkins were dry, then I just sanded them down a little bit with some 80 grit sandpaper. Now I was able to find this sandpaper at the Dollar Tree. It came in a huge package for $1.25. And I think this is an excellent deal. It is in the automotive section, like where they have all of the auto stuff as well as tools. So once I sanded down all of my little pumpkins, then I just took some sticks and I attached those to the tops because these are going to be my pumpkin stems. I didn't drill holes or anything, I just attached the stick to the top of the pumpkin. And then I took a scrap leaf from a project that I had done in the past, and I cut those little scraps down to smaller pieces, and these are going to be the leaves for the tops of my pumpkins. And then I found some dried, I don't know, this is something dried. So I just cut a piece of it off because I thought it would look really nice, give a little bit of something different, a little bit of texture to just one of the pumpkins. And that is my tallest pumpkin. Then I took the other two pumpkins and I attached them so that this is a group or a trio of pumpkins. And I just used hot glue to do that. Next, I took a piece of jute twine and then I tied it around the pumpkin bunch. I just tied a square knot into the twine. And then I cut it down so that it was shorter. Next, I took a little bit of hot glue and secured down one piece of the twine, the piece that wanted to jump up and run away. And then I unraveled the ends of the jute twine to, again, add a little bit of texture and interest to my project. Next, I just cut down the jute twine so that it's about the same size as my pumpkins. All right, this is such an easy project. I found this adorable sign at Hobby Lobby. It was $2.99 and it was on sale for 40% off. And I'm thinking this is like an ornament or something, and I'm not going to use it like that. So I went ahead and removed that top with those beads. They're super cute, but not for what I'm wanting to do with this cutting board. Then I took a couple of tumbling tower blocks and I secured 2 of the tumbling tower blocks together with the Dollar Tree wood glue. And then I added a third one. And next I took one of the tumbling tower blocks and I put that single block onto the cutting board and then secured it onto the lower blocks. Now this is going to make like an easel or a stand for this cute little sign. And I did the same thing with this adorable little gnome. Oh my gosh, he is so cute. Again, $2.99, 40% off at Hobby Lobby, but he won't stand up, so he definitely needs a back as well. Now, if you don't have the wood glue, you can use hot glue. So I hot glued 2 tumbling tower blocks together, put a little bit of glue on the back of those 2, and then attached it to my gnome. And then I took 2 more tumbling tower blocks, glued them together, and then secured them onto the base of the gnome. And now my ornament, that wooden stand, will stand up very well. Isn't that cute? All right, so here is one of my tiered trays, and I'm just adding in a little bit of the extras. You can see some of the different decorations that I have. The one thing I want you to look at though is that little riser. That is one of the risers that I made in this video. And actually this tiered tray came from the Dollar Tree in the Dollar Plus section. It was $5 and I think it's adorable. But I really like this happy pumpkin spice. It looks like it's a latte, and I think it looks great sitting on top of that riser. That riser is nice because it elevates the piece. And if you don't have a tiered tray, you can DIY one. This is a Dollar Tree charger, a candlestick, and a couple of wood rounds from the Dollar Tree. Now I'm just going to go ahead and stage out all of my little props. Do you see that tiny little riser? Yep, I made that one too. Risers are so nice for your tiered trays. And there's the little trio of pumpkins that I made, and a candle that I got at Target. And a cute little pumpkin patch sign that came from Hobby Lobby. Then on the top, there is the really pretty wood riser we made. There's our little pumpkin gnome. And there's the first wood riser that I made in the beginning of this video. There is the little autumn pumpkins cutting board. There's a picture from Hobby Lobby and some wooden beads. Then I just added in a few orange pumpkins. This tiered tray is having an orange pumpkin theme, so I'm only using orange pumpkins. I added in a couple of leaves. And a nice little plant that is actually a candle holder from the Dollar Tree with some faux ferns. Next, I added in just the finishing touches, a couple small little pumpkins to the top and the lower level of the tray. And this tiered tray is done. Oh my goodness, isn't this cute? See how easy it is to do a couple of DIY projects for your tiered tray. and then just kind of fit them in with pieces that you already have. Oh, and this tray, this even came from the Dollar Tree. Isn't this adorable?
Hi, Diva, and today I'm going to show you how to make chalk paint. Yes, I did this out of necessity. I needed some chalk paint, so I needed to make some, and I thought I would show you how to do it. So you need a jar, some calcium carbonate, and the paints, and then some measuring tools, and of course some water. You also need a stirring stick. So I have this jar, and I'm going to start off by taking some of this calcium carbonate powder and putting it into the jar. So I was just using a tablespoon to measure off some of the calcium carbonate and put it into the jar. And then I used about a 1/4 cup of water and mixed those two ingredients together. Yep, I added the water to the calcium carbonate that is in the jar and then blended it together until it was smooth. Now it's best if you add a little bit of water at a time. So I've got my calcium carbonate mixture and I'm going to pour some of it into another jar. Then I'm going to take the paint that I'm going to be using for my project and I'm going to add the paint. So this was a brand new bottle of paint and I got it at Hobby Lobby, and this is the color Terra, just an acrylic paint, but you can use any paint that you want to get this chalk paint appearance. So then I just blended in the paint to my calcium carbonate mixture, and that is pretty much it. That is how you make chalk paint. It's very easy to do. And you can tell if you're successful by pulling out the stirring stick and seeing that there's no lumps and clumps. That's why you mix the calcium carbonate powder into the water first. Next, I labeled the jar, so that way I'll know that this is terracotta chalk paint. And I also had some leftover calcium carbonate mixtures, and I don't want to waste it because I'm sure I will find something that I can use this for. So I went ahead and labeled the lid calcium carbonate mix and put the lid back onto the jar, and that way I can store it until I need it again. And I had this vase. This is what I wanted to paint this terracotta color. So I used a chip brush to paint the first layer of the paint on. And this paint is pretty thin, so I did a thin coat of the paint for the first coat. I would recommend doing thinner coats and less paint on the project because you don't want to have any runs. And the chip brush did work pretty well, but when you want to have a very smooth finish, you'll want to use a different type of paintbrush. I let it fully dry before moving on to the next coat of paint. So this is one coat of the paint so far, and you can still see the glass through it a little bit, so I'm going to go ahead and give it another coat of paint. Now the second coat of paint, I probably should have switched my paintbrushes because the chip brush was actually taking off some of that first layer of paint. And after the second layer of paint dried, I did go back with a different paintbrush and I gave it one more coat of paint. And I got the idea for this by looking at Pottery Barn, and they had a big vase like this, but it was a gray finish. I wanted mine to be terracotta though, but that was how I was inspired to create this vase, which was just a vase that I had in a Dollar Tree candlestick. So all in, I have 3 coats of paint on my terracotta vase. I did go ahead and paint even the bottom, and this is my end result. This is my DIY chalk paint in terracotta. And this is exactly the finish that I was going for. And I did this because I wanted to try different faux painting techniques on glass and ceramics and even plastic. And I'm very happy with the results that this homemade chalk paint gave me.
It is time to make some DIY fall decor.
And the first thing I need to do is cut out the stem. Now the stem is like part of this foam pumpkin, so I couldn't just pull it off. So I had to cut out the stem, and I'm using this little craft knife by Fiskars. It's really helpful for projects like this. So not only did I have to cut out the stem, but I also had to cut a hole in the bottom of the pumpkin, because what I'm going to do is put the ribbon around the pumpkin. So it's going to go from the top to the bottom. So the top has a hole and the bottom has a hole. So next I took some burlap ribbon and I measured it on the pumpkin and then cut it down to the size that it would fit around the pumpkin. And while this isn't Dollar Tree burlap, they do have it. Actually, they have a lot of it right now, but I had this and I wanted to use it up. So I just cut down this burlap ribbon into pieces that will fit around the pumpkin. And then I just used my hot glue gun, put a little bit of hot glue on one side of the ribbon, pushed it into the pumpkin, and ran it down to the other hole, which is the bottom of the pumpkin, and secured it in place with a little bit of hot glue. And I repeated the process with more ribbon until the entire pumpkin was covered. And one thing that I like to do when doing projects like this is if I do one side, then I like to go opposite of that and do the other side. This way it keeps the ribbon even and equal all the way around the pumpkin. And once I had the pumpkin covered with the burlap ribbon, I took some more burlap ribbon and I just cut it down into smaller pieces. I really like the texture that the burlap gives. So I'm just removing a couple of strands on either side of the ribbon. And then I actually ended up trimming it down so it was a little bit smaller. Next, I took those smaller pieces of burlap and I covered the pumpkin where there were any openings. So if there was any of the white showing through of the original pumpkin, I just covered it with the thinner burlap ribbon. And once I was happy with how my burlap pumpkin was looking, then I came back with some thicker string, I guess. It's almost like yarn, but it's actually thicker. I believe this is macrame cord, and I found this on Amazon. And like always, I will have links in the description box in case you would like to replicate this pumpkin for yourself. So then I just took that macrame cord or cordage, whatever it's called, and I put that on top of the burlap that was already on the pumpkin. And I wanted to show you, this is the way that I like to do all of these projects, is opposite sides. So if I do one side, then I go directly across the pumpkin and do the opposite side. And this part is really good to show you that you have equal sides of that cordage around the pumpkin. That way you can also see that there is a larger blank space. So I just went back and added a couple more pieces of that cord to the pumpkin. And once I secured all of the cord on the top of the pumpkin, then I flipped over the pumpkin and secured the cord on the bottom as well. And some of those pieces were a little bit long, obviously. Then I just used my scissors and cut them down so that they will all match up. And there is my pumpkin so far, but I want to add a little bit of different color. And I had this thicker jute twine, and I thought this would look really nice in between the white cord that's on the pumpkin. So I just cut pieces of it off and again, put that on the pumpkin. And once I was happy with all of the pieces on the top side of the pumpkin, then I flipped it over and you guessed it, I secured the jute twine to the bottom of the pumpkin. And once the glue had time to dry, then I just removed the excess pieces of that jute twine. That is looking pretty nice. Next, I cut off a piece of that same jute twine and then I unraveled it. So the one piece actually becomes 3 pieces, but I like this because it gives a little bit of a different pattern to the jute that's going to be on the pumpkin. So when you unravel it, it has kind of a wave to it. And I thought that would look really nice on this pumpkin as well. I just continued my way around the pumpkin, securing random pieces of that wavy jute twine to my rustic pumpkin. It is so much fun to do makeovers on these Dollar Tree carvable pumpkins. There's so many different variations that you can do, and I have a lot of videos showing you different projects, different makeovers for these pumpkins. And since unraveling the jute twine worked so well, I thought it might be fun to do the same thing with that macrame cordage, just to give a little bit more color to this pumpkin. And that is what is so fun about crafting. You don't have to do it exactly like I did. You can make this personal, make it fit into your decorating. But I really liked the different colors and textures that just 2 different types of material added. And with that, I am pretty happy with how this rustic pumpkin is looking. Now all that's left to do is add a stem. So I'm going to put some hot glue on top of my pumpkin. Then I'm going to use one of the pumpkin stems that I made. And if you're curious how to make a pumpkin stem like this, I do have a video showing you how to do it. I also wanted to add a little bit of extra embellishments, so I just used some faux leaves. And I don't even know what this is. Holly berries, white holly berries? I don't know. But I added those to the pumpkin as well. And there is my rustic pumpkin. Oh my goodness, isn't this adorable? It's so pretty. And it was so easy to make just using a Dollar Tree foam pumpkin. And if you're enjoying this video, go ahead and click that subscribe button and click the bell notification. That way you'll get an alert every time I have a new video coming out. For the first project, I've got this Dollar Tree pumpkin and it has an R on it, but that doesn't really matter because I'm going to paint this pumpkin one solid color. Now it did take 2 coats of paint to completely cover the R so that it didn't show through on the pumpkin. And after the paint had dried, then I came back with some burnt umber and I just lightly put that paint onto the pumpkin. I wanted the burnt umber to be more like a shadow. So I just wiped off some of the excess paint while it was still wet. And it gives a really nice shadow effect to the project. But I wanted the pumpkin to have a little bit of something extra, so I had these beads. They're just wood beads that I put on some jute twine, and I thought it would give a nice farmhouse, rustic, cozy feeling to just kind of hang the beads onto the pumpkin. So I removed some of the beads from the bead strand, and then I used hot glue and a couple of tumbling tower blocks to secure the bead strand in place on the back of the pumpkin so it won't show up when the pumpkin is displayed. But my tassel was a little bit long, so I just cut off about an inch of the tassel so it won't hang down past the pumpkin. And I really loved how simple it was to make over this Dollar Tree pumpkin into something more personal for my own decorating this year. Now, I've got a lot of tumbling tower blocks. Oh my gosh, so many tumbling tower blocks. So what I want to do is I want to make a chair that I can display something on and use it as a riser on my tiered tray. So for the first part, I took 5 of the tumbling tower blocks and glued them together. And I used the Dollar Tree Super Glue wood glue. This wood glue is so strong, you don't need very much of it at all, and you will get a permanent bond. And it works really well for gluing together tumbling tower blocks. So once those were attached, I set them off to the side to dry. Then I took some more tumbling tower blocks and I glued them together. So I took 2 and glued them together. And then I repeated the process with another set and another set and another set and then one more set. And then I repeated the process 4 more times. So I'm gluing 2 of the tumbling tower blocks together. So if you're doing this project, you'll need 7 of the 2 tumbling tower blocks glued together because this is going to be the back of the chair. What I'm doing is I'm taking 3 of those double tumbling tower blocks and I'm gluing them together end to end. And then I'll repeat the process with 3 more of the double glued together tumbling tower blocks. Then I took the flat 5 tumbling tower blocks and I took 2 of the double tumbling tower blocks and I glued those on the front long side of the 5 pieces. Next, I took some single blocks and I glued those in between on the top portion of the double 3 layers of blocks. I hope this makes sense, but you can see this is going to be the back of the chair. Now I did take a little bit of hot glue and use that for the instant grab while I was gluing the back of the chair together. Then all I had to do was add the front of the chair to the back of the chair. And again, I did use the wood glue as well as a little bit of hot glue, so I get that instant stick. Next, I came back with my hot glue gun and I just filled in some of the blank spaces so that it looks like it's all one piece. And that was looking pretty good, but you can still tell that these are tumbling tower blocks. So I did go ahead and use some more wood glue on the base of the chair just to make sure that it's really strong. And even though these blocks are already brown, I did come back with some burnt umber and paint every part of the chair. In between the rungs, everything, the bottom, the underside, the back, everything, I gave a coat of burnt umber paint. And if you want, you can stop right here. You can just be done with your project. But for me, I wanted it to really look like this was a piece of furniture. So I came back with some joint compound and I just filled in any of the little crevices of the tumbling tower blocks. And I could have waited to paint the chair, but I wasn't sure if I was going to need to do this, but I did. So then I just painted the chair again with the burnt umber, and then I came back with some different acrylic paints. I think this is raw sienna, and I just added a little bit of different colors of paints to really give this chair some texture and make it look more vintage or old. And then I came back with some white paint to really give it an aged appearance. And I want this chair to look like a chair. I don't want it to look like tumbling tower blocks, which is why I did all of the little extra steps. Here is the end result, and I am so happy with how this turned out. I think it looks fantastic, and it's a great addition to a tiered tray. And speaking of tiered trays, I wanted to see if I could make smaller tiered trays. I've seen something like this at Hobby Lobby, but I wanted to use these round boxes that I got from the Dollar Tree. And to get started, what I did was just take the lids off of the boxes, and then using some black acrylic paint, I painted the boxes. I painted the inside, around the edge, I painted the bottom. Both tops of the boxes got a coat of acrylic paint. Now, if you don't have black acrylic paint or you want to skip this step, you can and just go on to the spray paint. But I promise you, by doing the base coat first, it will make the spray painting a lot easier. And for the dowels, what I did was I took this Dollar Tree toy because it has a really nice wooden dowel. And I just used a screwdriver set, and actually I did get this at the Dollar Tree as well, but I removed the handle from the dowel. And you can see it's a really nice wooden dowel. Now this is another tiered tray that I want to make. I want to make a squared one as well as the round one. So I'm just playing around and trying to determine how long I want the dowels to be. I used my saw out in the garage and cut them down to the size I wanted them to be. I also did sand them down. Then I brought them back into my craft room and gave them a coat of the black paint as well. And I think you saw earlier I did paint the rectangle box tops as well, because that is going to be another tiered tray. Tiered trays are so much fun to decorate, and I've seen smaller ones at Hobby Lobby, but I wanted to see if I could make it myself using Dollar Tree items. So for each tiered tray, I'm going to need 2 of the dowels. So I've got 4 dowels here that I've painted, and on the shorter ones, I'm going to attach a ping pong ball. And yes, this came from the Dollar Tree. This is going to be like the round part that's on the top just for decoration. You could also use a bead if you didn't have the ping pong balls. I just didn't have any wooden beads that were the size that I wanted them to be, so the ping pong balls worked great. I love using items that I find at the Dollar Tree to make original decor pieces for my decorating. Now, once all of the acrylic paint had dried, then it was time to attach the different box lids to the wooden dowels. So I did use E6000 for this because I wanted to have a permanent bond. If you use hot glue, it's not going to be as sturdy. So here are my 2 tiered trays, and I have some semi-gloss black paint from Rust-Oleum And it really didn't take very much spray paint to give these tiered trays a finished look. And here they are, all finished and ready to use in my fall decorating. And I just took a few different things and put them on the square one and also the round one just to show you how you can add little decorator accents to your fall decorating. All right, so this is so much fun. I love these. They're almost like giant bottle caps, but they also make really great pie tins. So I'm going to make some pumpkin pies with these. So the larger one you can buy at Dollar Tree, and the smaller one is a Christmas ornament. Again, you can find it at Dollar Tree. Now I did have some Sculpey clay. This is the clay that you can bake in the oven, but I didn't bake mine. I just wanted to see if this would work. So I took the orange, and it did take the entire package of the Sculpey clay for me to put it into the smaller Christmas ornament. But look at it, it looks like pumpkin pie. Now I also had some air dry clay, so I just took a big portion of this and I rolled it out so that my goal is to have it fit into this metal piece that I got from the Dollar Tree. And the air dry clay actually worked really well for this. I just had to remove the excess clay from around the outside of the metal pie tin. It looks like a pie tin, so I'm going to call it a pie tin. Then I used a little rolling pin just to smooth it down. And by doing it like this, it worked really well. And I also painted the air dry clay before it had time to dry out. I didn't know if it would crack or anything, but it didn't. It is actually perfect. And I know you've seen people do this before, but I'm going to be using some spackling, compound spackling paste for my whipped cream for my pies. But one thing that I've found that works really well is I double up on those frosting bags, because sometimes the spackling is hard to get out of the bag. And I've actually had the bags rip on me in the past, and I don't want that to happen. This DAP Fast and Final spackle is the absolute best that I have worked with when I'm making different crafts like this and I want to have whipped cream. So I just took that spackle and using a craft stick, I put it into my doubled up frosting bag. And I do have a star tip that's on the end for the frosting or spackle to come out. Now I'm not the best at doing this decorating. I'm not the best cake decorator, but using a star tip, it's actually pretty easy. And look at that, it really looks like whipped cream. And you can also see that I did paint the air dry clay with orange acrylic paint. And this is Spiced Pumpkin is the name of the paint. Making these faux foods or desserts is so much fun. I love doing this. And I added a big dollop of whipped cream right in the middle of the pie. And then I just repeated this process with the smaller pumpkin pie that I have. Again, I'm not the best cake decorator, but that's okay. This is just going to go on one of my tiered trays. And of course, I had to add a dollop of whipped cream right in the center as well. Look at how adorable that is. Oh my gosh, I love these pumpkin pies. They are so cute and they were really easy to make. Now, this is a really fun project. I got this yarn at Hobby Lobby for $3.49. It was on clearance. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this yarn onto a Dollar Tree foam pumpkin. So I cut the yarn into strands, and each strand is 24 inches long. And I'm going to be braiding this yarn together. So for each braid, you need to have 6 pieces of yarn that is 2 foot long. Next, I took some twine and I secured 6 pieces of the yarn, and I just tied a knot around the top end. And one thing that I learned when tying twine like this by yourself, if you don't have someone to hold, like put their finger in the middle of it, if you wrap the twine a couple of times before you go to tighten it, it will keep the twine nice and tight. So when you're doing a knot, you just repeat the process and you just tie it. So I guess that's a square knot. And then I just removed the excess twine. And I also removed the excess yarn from the top of the braid. Then using something to weigh it down, I just braided the yarn together. So each portion of the braid has 2 strands of the yarn. And this yarn is like a thick, chunky blanket type yarn. And braiding isn't hard to do. You just fold the ends over top of each other and work your way down all of the strands until you get till the end. And once I got to the end, I took another piece of the twine and I just did my square knot again. And again, I wrapped it around a couple of times. So instead of 1 time, I did like 3 times, and that will help to keep that string nice and tight as you finish your square knot. So there are all of my braided strands of yarn, and I have 9 in total. So then what I did was take another piece of the twine. So I folded each braid in half, and I took another piece of twine and tied it around the center. Then I took another piece of twine and I tied it very close to the first piece. Then this is in the middle of the braid. And once I had removed the excess twine, then I cut in between those 2 pieces of twine. So now my 1 braid has become 2. And you can see this is how it's going to wrap around the pumpkin. So my 9 braids have become 18. And I know it looks like it's a lot of work, but I promise it isn't. So here's my Dollar Tree foam pumpkin. I got this last year. I still have a lot of these, thankfully. And I just cut the top center out on the pumpkin. And then I flipped it over and I cut a big circle on the bottom as well. And what I'm going to be doing is taking the braided yarn and putting it into those 2 holes, the top and the bottom. Now, just in case there was any of the pumpkin that was going to show, I did go ahead and paint this pumpkin orange so that it will mostly match the yarn. A lot of times I like to go to Hobby Lobby and find things like this yarn when it's on clearance. I had no idea of what I was going to use it for, but it was such a good deal, I could not pass it up. So once my pumpkin was dry, then I used my hot glue gun and I put a little bit of hot glue onto the center of the pumpkin where I had cut it out. Then I ran the glue down the side of the pumpkin. And then I just brought the yarn around the side and then tucked it into the bottom of the pumpkin. And I tried to keep the pieces of yarn equal. So what I did on one side of the pumpkin, then I did on the opposite side of the pumpkin. I find that by doing it this way, it's a lot easier to keep all of the braided pieces nice and straight. Now, I do have to tell you that once you get close to the end, it is very difficult to push that braided yarn into the hole because this yarn is really thick. So you could do this with the yarn that you find at the Dollar Tree as well. It's just going to take a lot more of those braided strands to completely cover the pumpkin. So I'm just continuing the process all the way around the pumpkin. And again, what I do on one side, I flip it over and do the exact same thing on the opposite side. And once the hole started getting really full, I did use a craft stick to help push that yarn down into the center of the pumpkin, both on the top and the bottom. And I also found that by spreading out the glue onto the foam pumpkin itself and then just kind of pushing the braids down, that way I made sure that none of that pumpkin was going to show through. And once I was finished covering the pumpkin, I did take my hot glue gun and really just put a lot of hot glue. This is actually the bottom of the pumpkin. And then I smushed it down onto my silicone mat. And I do want my pumpkin to have a nice stem. So I had this real pumpkin stem. Actually, I think it was from an acorn squash. So it wasn't quite thick enough for the pumpkin. So I took some of this braided rope and I just used my hot glue gun and I followed the direction of the pumpkin stem and I just glued the rope onto the stem. I just continued this process all around the stem, adding in new pieces of the rope. I did keep the rope a little bit long on either side of the pumpkin stem too. And when I got to some sections of the pumpkin stem, I just used a little bit of that braided rope just to fill it in because I don't want to see any of the original pumpkin stem. I want it to look like this rope. This is probably my new favorite technique for making rustic pumpkin stems. Now at the top of the stem, I did cut the rope all the way down so that it would just be at the end of the stem. And then I used a scissors just to remove any excess pieces, but you can see how that rope has become unbraided a little bit. That's what I wanted it to do. I want it to look like it's like coming out of the pumpkin. But for the top, I did go ahead and add in just one more small piece of that twine, and I just cut off any of the excess. And I left it a little bit longer at the base. And then just kind of roughed up the edges of the rope itself. Then all I had to do was secure it onto the top of my pumpkin. Look at how pretty that is. I love making pumpkin stems like this. So cute. Now, I didn't film this part, so what this is it's a Dollar Tree frame and extra large craft sticks that I cut to fit into the frame. And then I glued wooden beads all the way around the outside edge. Now I'm taking some chalk paint and I'm going to paint this entire piece with this white chalk paint. So I'm going to be making a riser with this, kind of a farmhouse riser. And I'm pretty sure you can figure out how I did it. So I didn't think it was that big of a deal to not have the first portion of where I glued the craft sticks and the beads to the Dollar Tree frame. And while this part is a little bit tedious of filling in around all of those beads, it is worth it in the end. And it's actually easier and it looks better than spray paint. Now, while that was drying, I took another Dollar Tree frame and I removed all of the components. I just want the frame itself. So I even took off those little spikes that hold everything together because I won't need them. And then I used that same chalk paint and I painted all sides of the frame, both the front, the top, the sides, everything. Got a couple of coats of the white chalk paint to make sure every part of the frame was covered with the paint. I want this thing to be completely white. And I did do 2 coats of the white chalk paint on all of these pieces. So here is the bottom section of my tray. But I want to have this raised up, so I took some larger beads and I glued those to the bottom of the tray. First, for the instant stick, I did use my hot glue gun for all 4 beads. And then I put a little bit of the super glue, the wood glue super glue, into those holes. And once that was dry, I flipped it over and then I took some E6000 and I put that across the top of the beads. I did all 4 sides of the beaded tray with the E6000 glue. Then I took the plain frame and I secured it to the top of the beads. And while that was drying, I flipped it back over and I painted all of the feet or the wood beads with the same chalk paint. It's pretty fun what you can do with a couple of Dollar Tree frames and some beads, and a few extra large craft sticks. Now, once everything was set up, my tray was done, and look at that. Look at this adorable farmhouse style tray that I can use in my decorating. Now, I was looking for a very thick pumpkin because I want to make it look like a wooden cutting board. And this pumpkin from the Dollar Tree is the perfect size. So it's nice and thick and chunky, and it just had this cardboard piece on the front, and I don't want that. So I just used a scraper to remove that, and then I used the scraper to remove all of the excess cardboard that was still left on the pumpkin. Now, someone had mentioned to make sure I show removing the tags. So here I am removing the tag from the back of the pumpkin, which will be the top of the pumpkin. So I am sanding everything down with the Dollar Tree sanding block. These things are wonderful. Then I took my favorite brown burnt umber paint and I painted the pumpkin brown. I made sure to get the sides as well because, again, I want to make this look like a cutting board. And once my paint had dried, I didn't know how I was going to make this work. So I came back with some white paint and some more burnt umber, and I was trying to put lines on the pumpkin to make it look like wood. But as you can see, it really doesn't look too much like wood. It looks like a painted pumpkin. But sometimes you just have to trust the process. So I wasn't ready to give up, so I continued painting the burnt umber and the white paint on the pumpkin. Now, I did come back with some other paints while that was still wet, and these are acrylic paints for painting, like if you're painting pictures. And I haven't used them for painting pictures, but I can tell you these are great for wood crafts too. So I just took different shades of brown and just drew lines of the paint onto the pumpkin. Now, I think this is looking a little more like wood, which is the look that I wanted to get because I want this to look like it's a cutting board. Now I wouldn't use it as a cutting board. This is merely for decoration. But like I said, I just trusted the process and kept adding layers of paint to the pumpkin. The raw sienna is the color that looks orange on this, and I really like that on this piece. Now, once that was dry, I wanted to give this a matte finish. So I took some Deco Art Ultra Matte varnish, or it's a sealer, and I just used a foam brush to paint this onto my pumpkin. It gives a really nice soft appearance, and I also made sure to coat all of the sides as well. And here is my faux pumpkin cutting board. I am really happy with how this turned out. I really like it, and it works well as a riser for my other projects. Now, this is so much fun. I love these little pumpkins from Dollar Tree. There's so many things that you can do with them. So what I'm gonna do is remove any of the embellishments, so those raffia bows, as well as the stems. And I had this scrapbook paper, which is kind of like cardstock. It's pretty thick. And what I did was cut it out so that it will cover each of the pumpkins. I thought about doing different color pumpkins for each one, but in the end I decided that this would be the best look. So then I used some Mod Podge, and I just put that onto the back of each of the pumpkins, and see, I removed the tag as well. And then I just smoothed down the paper onto the pumpkin. I repeated that process on all 3 of the pumpkins, so they will all be the same. And once the Mod Podge had dried, then I just used a Dollar Tree sanding block, and I removed all of the excess paper from the pumpkin. The sanding block from Dollar Tree works really well, and you don't have to try and cut that scrapbooking paper. You can just sand it away. And this is how they turned out with just sanding it. So now I needed to give them some stems, and I went out into my yard, I found some sticks, and then I used my handy little table saw, I guess this is a table saw, and I cut the stick down to size for each of my pumpkins, and then I used my hot glue gun and secured the stems into the holes that are already pre-drilled in the pumpkins. I wanted to add a little bit of something extra to my pumpkins, so I took some Spanish moss, and using my hot glue gun, I just secured that to the top on either side of the stem. But I just went around the stem, so it's all just one solid piece of the Spanish moss. And then I used some other embellishments like these paper leaves. I believe I got these at Hobby Lobby. And I also made some tags, and I just used rubber stamps to put the words onto the pumpkins. And each pumpkin has a different tag, and I just used a little bit of baker's twine to have the tag hang from the pumpkin. And now I have 3 cute little pumpkins that say, "I love fall." Now I had this frame that I got from Goodwill, and I also had this burlap ribbon. I really wanted to do like one solid piece of burlap, but I didn't have any. So I made do with what I had. So I just secured the burlap ribbon to the back of the sign that I got from Goodwill. I just wanted to make sure that that cardboard backing was all covered. And then I flipped over the sign and I secured the remnants or the leftover piece to the back of the sign. And that's what that looks like. Next, I took a tape measure and measured off the sign because I want to make sure I get my pumpkin centered. And I put the middle pumpkin in the middle of the burlap. And then I put the other 2 pumpkins 2 inches away from the center pumpkin. And once they were dry, I added the frame back onto the picture, and this is the project. Look at how pretty this is. I love doing things like this with things that I find at the Dollar Tree. I had so much fun. I've been making so many fall DIY projects that I cannot wait to share them with you. All right, so first you need some tumbling tower blocks for this pumpkin or pumpkins, and some wood crafting cubes and some wood glue. If you don't have wood glue, that's okay. You can also use a hot glue gun, but I do find that the wood glue from the Dollar Tree actually works better for working with the tumbling tower blocks. You don't need very much of it, and it connects the blocks together very well without having any residue, and it's very strong. So first I'm going to take some tumbling tower blocks and I'm going to separate them. So first I have 4, then 3, then a group of 2, then 1, and I've done this twice. Then I'm going to glue the tumbling tower blocks together, each of those little sections. So we're going to have 2 sections that have 4 blocks each. That's what I'm gluing together right here. Then I'm going to glue 3 tumbling tower blocks together. And then 2 together. And again, I'm going to have 2 sets of these tumbling tower blocks. So 2 of the 4 pieces, 2 of the 3 pieces, 2 of the 2 pieces, and 2 of the 1 pieces. Does that make sense? And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to stack them. So I have one of the 4 tumbling tower blocks. I'm stacking the 3 glued together tumbling tower blocks on top of that. Then I'm going to take the 2 tumbling tower blocks and put that on top of the 3. Then I'm going to take the single one and glue that in the center of the 2 glued together tumbling tower blocks. Then I'm going to repeat the process for the other set that I made. So the 3 is going to get glued to the 4. Then the 2 will get glued to the 3. And then the single one will get glued to the 2. Now I'm going to take both sections and I'm going to glue them together so that the 4s meet up together on the bottom. That is a lot of tumbling tower blocks, but I'm not done. That's one pumpkin, but I'm going to show you how to make a bigger pumpkin doing it the same way. So this took almost an entire
container of tumbling tower blocks to make the tall one. And I'm just going to repeat the process, but I'm going to double them. So for the 4, it's going to have 8. For the 3, it's going to have 6. For the 2, it's going to be 4. And for the 1, it will become 2. They're just stacked lengthwise on top of each other. Once you have them all glued together, it's time to assemble the pumpkin. So you have the double 4, you're going to glue the double 3 on top of that. Then you're going to take the double 2 and you're going to glue that to the double 3. And finally, you take the double single and you glue that to, you know what I'm trying to say. Yes. So you can see how you've got one little section like that. And then you're going to repeat the process, the 3 to the 4, then the 2 to the 3, then the 1 to the 2. Can you see how tall this pumpkin's going to be? So then you're going to take both pieces and you're going to glue them together. Now you have a really tall pumpkin. So then the craft cubes are going to be the stems for the pumpkin. So for the smaller pumpkin, I used 1. And for the taller pumpkin, I actually used 2 of the cubes stacked on top of each other. I think they make a perfect stem for the wooden pumpkins. And once the pumpkins had dried, I took some orange acrylic paint. I think this is actually terracotta. And then I used a Dollar Tree brush. This brush is perfect for dry brushing a little bit of paint onto wood projects like this. So I just dabbed a little bit of the paint onto the pumpkins. And if you want, you can totally make this a solid orange or whatever color you want it to be. But for me, I wanted to see a little bit of that natural wood coming through. So it's more of a dry brushing technique for the painting. And if you wanted to get creative, you could use different shades of orange as well, or whatever color you wanted to paint your pumpkin. So I did the sides and then I also did the top. And then I just went back around the sides just to see if I wanted to add in a little bit more orange. So I did it on the small pumpkin and then I repeated the process on the larger one. And if you are using the Dollar Tree wood glue, this stuff is so sturdy. Don't worry, your pumpkin will not break apart. It would take a lot to break apart the pumpkin. You'd have to use a lot of pressure. The glue also dries really quick, so you can do this project probably in just a couple of hours. Now, once I was done with that, then I took some dark wax, just a tiny little bit of it, and I used the same paintbrush, and then I just dry brushed some of that wax onto the pumpkin. I did it on the larger pumpkin, and then I repeated the process on the smaller one. And once I was finished with that, I did go ahead and use that dark wax on the stem or the little cubes that were on the top. Now once that was all dry, then I took some foliage. These are just plastic leaves that I had left over from some other project, and I attached those onto the top of the pumpkins. And to give it a little bit something extra, I took this wired craft paper that I had. I wrapped it around a paintbrush to give it kind of just that rolled or curly appearance, because I want my pumpkins to have a little bit of a curly vine. So I just did that with several pieces of the wired craft paper, and then I secured them to my pumpkins with some hot glue. And there you have it. That is how easy it is to make some pumpkins out of tumbling tower blocks. I know this has been done before, but I wanted to put my own twist on it, and I am so happy with how they turned out. I think they're adorable and they are original, and I think they are a great addition to my fall decor for this year. I took the pumpkins outside because I want to coat them with a coat of primer paint. So I'm going to separate the pumpkins, and we're going to start with the largest one first. So unfortunately, the primer paint that I got, it actually ended up clogging up. So I was able to get one pumpkin with the, it's just real primer, and that worked really well to give a nice coat to the pumpkin. But once that ran out, I just grabbed a can of a satin finish spray paint that I had, and I spray painted the remaining two pumpkins with the satin spray paint. So what this will do is help the paint that I'm going to put onto it stick to it without just kind of like being able to be scratched off easily. And after my spray paint was dry, I brought them back in to paint them. Now I used this orange spice and white paint, and I mixed them together to get the orange that I wanted for the larger pumpkin. So I'm doing this color orange on the bottom pumpkin, or the largest pumpkin. So I'm just gonna go around the entire pumpkin and paint it with this orange paint. And this paint is just your typical acrylic paint that you can get at Hobby Lobby, Michael's, or even the Dollar Tree. Now I did want to add a little bit of dimension to this pumpkin, so when I was all done painting it orange, and while it was still wet, I did use some burnt umber, and then I just applied that to the deeper parts of the pumpkin. See those lines that I'm putting on? So I just added the burnt umber in, and then I blended the burnt umber and the orange paint together. So this will give a little bit of shadow, a little bit of dimension to the plastic pumpkin, so it doesn't look quite so plastic. So now while the orange pumpkin is drying, I'm going to use the acrylic paint again on the middle pumpkin, or the medium-sized pumpkin. And I think this is called Cafe au lait or something. I think it's a folk art paint. I don't know. But it was kind of an oatmeal color, kind of a light tan. So I went ahead and painted this pumpkin with this tan-ish paint. And once I had him all painted and he was still wet, I added in some white paint to give, you guessed it, some more dimension to the pumpkin. And then I just blended the white into that tan color. Now you don't have to use these colors for your pumpkins. You can do whatever you want. I just really liked these. And then for the tiny pumpkin, I did paint him green and then add in some white. I didn't show you that part because I figured you'd seen me paint. So, but then I took some burnt umber and I painted the stem of the small pumpkin with the burnt umber paint. And these are the pumpkins. These are all finished. And once the acrylic paint had dried, I did take them outside and give them a nice coat of a spray sealer. And this was in a shiny coat because that's all I had. So now the fun part, now I'm going to assemble my topiary. So these pumpkins do snap together, but I am going to give them a little bit of extra support and use some hot glue because I'm going to add in some reindeer moss all the way around the pumpkins. Now this reindeer moss, that's what it says on the package. It's like a moss, Spanish moss maybe, but I did get this at the Dollar Tree and it was $1.25 for one bag. And this one bag of reindeer moss was enough for both of the topiaries that I did because I made 2 topiaries so that they can sit on my front porch. And then I just continued this process between the top pumpkin and the middle pumpkin. And I do find that adding in that hot glue around the edge, it actually helps to secure the pumpkins together too. All right, so now that I have that reindeer moss all the way around the pumpkins, I'm just going to add in some little pieces, some different leaves that I have and some different greenery just to really make this pumpkin topiary just look even better. So I'm just going to add in some little silk flowers that I had. And I did this on every level. So on the lower level, the middle level, and I did even add a few extra onto the top of the pumpkin, the little tiny pumpkin too. And once I was finished, this is how my topiaries turned out. And you can see all the greenery and the leaves and stuff that I added. This is why I don't throw out anything that might be odds and ends, because you never know when you can use them. And here are the pumpkin topiaries on my front porch in these awesome planters that I made. And I'm going to show you guys how I did that in an upcoming video. But I am so happy with how these turned out. I can't believe that I only spent $5 per pumpkin topiaries.